Okay, let's kick things off. Welcome everybody to this event. Great pleasure to have Nicolai Tangen with us. We're going to be having a conversation about social science and successful companies, and perhaps some other things as well we're going to discuss. The event's being hosted by the Department of Psychological and Behavioural Science, but it's happened because of the Nordic Society, who invited Nicolai to come and talk to them and find out, learn from his insights. So a little housekeeping: there's no fire drill expected, and if one does happen, please do exit and head on outside. I'm Tom Reeder. I direct the MSc in Organizational and Social Psychology at the LSE. My research looks at organizations, organizational culture, institutional failures, teamwork, and decision making.
And he's my professor.
I didn't mention. I'm too modest to mention that. And
kind of fun to come back and talk with your professor, no?
Yeah. No, it's a strange thing. And Nicolai was all. I mean, this is something I wanted to talk to you about, Nicolai, which is why on earth, leading a already very successful hedge fund investment firm, you came to study psychological and behavioral science. And maybe I'll just give a brief bio of you, just because that's the way to do things. And actually, we have a couple of questions on this. So Nicolai, CEO of the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund. I mean, this is in Norway it's called the Norwegian Pension Fund. Is that's sometimes how it's described? It manages 1.5% of shares around the world. The fund is worth around $2 trillion. Nicolai was founded and was CEO of AK Investment, itself a very successful firm. It's founded the AKO Foundation, a charitable foundation which has donated huge amounts of money in terms of education towards climate change, many good causes, and has donated to the LSE funds. We have AKO scholars right now, scholarships, students that are funded by the AKO Foundation that are here because of Nicolai's investment in that particular charity. So Nicolai, you've done 3 degrees, I think, 3 MSc degrees, so 3 postgraduate degrees, one in finance, one in art, culture and art, and one in social psychology, which was here at the LSE.
I did one in Russian too.
And one in Russian too. They missed that. They missed that on your bio.
Yeah, that was when I was really young.
And I guess, I mean, that's where I would like to start, Nicolai, which is you obviously have a huge thirst for education, and in particular the social sciences. And why do you kind of, that's a lot of degrees and a lot of learning. What is it that you value? Why? What is the source of that?
Well, I think, I mean, learning is to me is the meaning of life. And some people think that, the person who's got the most money when he or she dies has won. I think it's wrong. I think that person has lost because you don't want to have any money left when you die because you want to use it on good things. But the person who knows the most, he or she has won, I think. And the more different type of things you can study, the better it is, because you combine knowledge in different ways. And if you look at the most innovative and creative people, they are the people who combine knowledge in different ways, have the most different type of friends, and just combine things in a new way. And then, of course, if you know how to learn, it makes it easier to continue to learn.
How do you use the knowledge that you do? So when you learn, do you learn for the pleasure, enjoyment of learning, or is there also an operational aspect to it? You learn so that you can use what you learn in your practice.
No, I don't think so. I learn I learn to learn, but I also love exams. I mean, I just think it's fantastic. You have a goal, you have something you need to learn towards, and you kind of take all the stuff you need to learn for that exam, you cut it into pieces, and you learn like one thing every day or every week. And so I think it's good to have a goal like that. Now, some of the things I put into use, like the finance I put into use, art I've put into use because I collect. But social psychology, I probably didn't know how much I was going to put it into use. And it's been just instrumental in how I do the job and how we innovate the way we run capital. And there were three particular things that I focused in on when I was here. One was decision making, which is your fields, of course, how you take away bias from decision making. Extremely important when you run capital, right? When you make investments, you must not let what you thought yesterday impact what you think today. And it's so easy to be anchored at different type of things. Then I looked at how you can make a safe environment to make decisions. So to create this kind of safety and security that people need in order to make good decisions. But then the last thing I did was how people use analysis and the gut feel when they make decisions. And that's what I did my thesis on. So given that I had been running capital before and ran a company, I knew a lot of the asset managers in Europe. And so I interviewed the 10 best ones. Now, normally social psychologists would not have access to these people because they got better things to do. They can spend the day making money rather than talking to the likes of Tom Reeder or me. But I managed to talk to them, and also since I knew finance, I understood what they were talking about, right? Because it's about this kind of jargon. And should I talk a bit about what my findings?
I wanted to know if you remembered your findings. Go for it.
It's so interesting. So, if you ask somebody, do you depend on your gut feel in investments? Nobody does, right? Because it doesn't sound very good. If you ask them, hey, do you believe in your pattern recognition? It's just like, yeah, sure. It's the same thing, right? But you just call it something different. So many people believe in their pattern recognition, but you need to be quite senior in order to use it. Because if you guys come in, Kai-Anne, you come in as like junior analyst in a firm, and you go to the CEO and say, hey, my gut feel tells me I should buy this thing. It's just like, hey, why should I trust your gut feel? You are like 25 years old. And it doesn't make any sense. So first of all, nobody trusts anybody else's gut feel, only their own. You need to be quite senior in order to use it, because you need to have the ability to just put through whatever you think. And then it's something that develops over time. So it's just really interesting. No, the best portfolio managers in the world, I think they go somewhere between gut feel or pattern recognition and analysis. So they go between the two.
I remember from your thesis, so I remember that the people, the investors, they also did a lot of I remember you telling me they did post hoc analyses too. Like they never admit to doing a gut feeling. Afterwards, they kind of go to the paperwork and make out that they sort of justify their gut feel. Could you just sort of elaborate a little bit on that process? Why?
We live in a society where you need to kind of show that you have done the work, So you make the decision, and then you kind of cover your ass afterwards by doing a lot of analysis, so you have some kind of paper trail. Very common, right?
Yeah, very common. Nicolai, can I ask you about... because
I actually think a lot of the management consultants do the same thing. They come into a firm, it's just totally obvious what's wrong, right? So they decide what's wrong, and then they just do the analysis, and then they charge $1 million.
Yeah, but sometimes the firm knows what's wrong before they come in, maybe as well. Yeah. Could you talk us through what you do actually in that MPAM? So what is, because people be familiar with the fund, but maybe they won't know the specifics of it. And would you be able to talk a little about what it does, your role as CEO, what happens on a day-to-day basis, and how the decisions that you're making there, I mean, they don't just matter for Norway, they matter for the world. They have a big impact. Would you mind discussing that a bit? So first of all, your day-to-day, and then your thoughts on the impact of the fund.
Yeah, so just background of the fund. So they had been drilling for oil in Norway for many years, and then in '69 they were on the last well, out in the North Sea. And 2 o'clock in the morning, one of the guys was told to wake up the platform chief. So the platform chief was pretty fed up being woken up at 2 in the morning. He says, "Hey, why do you wake me up? You better have a good reason." And they had a very good reason, because they just found Ekofisk, which at that stage was the biggest offshore find the history had ever seen. And then sometimes finding a lot of resources like that is a curse, because it leads to corruption, crowding out of investments and so on. And so the politicians in Norway did something really clever. They put it into a fund. Started off at 2 billion Norwegian kroner in 1996. It's now 20,000 billion, or just below that. And we invest across the world. We own 1.5% of all the companies in the world, just under 3% of all the companies in Europe. And the idea is to safeguard this for future generations.
Yes.
Now, they also at the time put in place a spending rule, so they can only spend 3% of the fund. But since the fund is now so large, that's 25% of the state budget in Norway. And what we do, or what I do, is to look after 700 people who, invest money across the world, who make sure we do it in a responsible manner, a lot of focus on responsibility, on compliance. We do it in the correct way, a huge usage of technology. We are like a large technology company. So it's to get all these people to work together.
And are you still involved? So, I mean, there's just huge decisions being made. To what degree do you have oversight of those, or are people just doing things and you're kind of getting a top line analysis? How does it work?
It's not like totally random what they do. I mean, we have a plan. Okay. But more than that, more than having a plan, we have a mandate from the Ministry of Finance. And that's very important, because I would say there are a few reasons why the company has been successful. One is a very broad anchoring amongst the political parties in Norway. And so that when you have a change of government, you don't change your plans and you don't change your strategy. So it's been going on now for nearly 30 years. It's very consistent. The second thing is a spending rule, I said, so that you don't have a government who's just trying to buy votes. And then the last thing, it's a very transparent fund. It's the most transparent fund in the world. And I think transparency is a really fantastic thing. It really builds trust.
Can I ask you to reflect a second on? I mean, obviously, I'm from the UK, as you know. I'm from Aberdeen, up in Scotland, and the UK didn't do the same thing as Norway. Why not? What? And actually, I would say what Norway did was quite extraordinary in some ways. I think what the UK did is what everybody else does. Why? What was it? Is it something about Norwegian society? Was it something about the way decisions are made, or maybe political stability? What is it that differentiated? Because it's a decision that's had massive ramifications.
Yeah, no, Norway could have done what they did in the UK. Spend, and it's tempting because there are so many interesting things you can spend money on. But I can't really tell. I can't really talk for the UK what they did. But for sure, they did the right thing in Norway.
And in terms of worth, yeah. I mean, a lot of they definitely did, and maybe there are other. I mean, in the UK, I guess it was a bit of a sticking plaster. It was just a temporary sticking plaster for monetary problems. Thinking a bit about the fund going forward, I mean, the world really is in. It's kind of bewilderingly complex right now, sort of socially, politically, technologically, all of these things. AI, all the things that you'll be familiar with. How does that filter into the fund? How does something like AI, this must have a massive influence on how you make decisions on the investments and increasing, reducing investments. How do you sort of grasp these particular changes, and how do they filter into your decision making?
Yeah, well, it's a big question, right? The first thing I want to say is that you are the luckiest people in the world because you live at a time where everything is changing overnight, right? And you can wake up and be, upset or depressed about some of the changes taking place in the world, but you can also put on your student hat and spin out of bed in the morning and think, wow, imagine living at this time where we just rewrite world history once a week. It's just unbelievable. I mean, how many people here read Financial Times? Yeah, that's quite good, right? But, you have to read Financial Times every day. You have to see what's going on. You have to just be super curious and just wonder, how is it possible, some of these things? It's just so interesting, And we are at a time where, geopolitics are changing, politics are changing, defense, politics are changing, technology is changing unbelievably fast. you know, if you look at like, you know, Olympics. So Olympics, Paris, here. Next Olympics, here. Between here and there, human being moves 1 or 2% faster. Technology, good, thank you. Can you still hear me? There we go. Technology moves 1,000 times faster, right? Because you go 10 times more chips, 10 times more efficient, and 10 times better software. So that's 1,000 times. You know, next Olympics, 2% faster human being, 1,000 times faster technology. What's 1,000 times 1,000? Yeah. 1 million, okay? Next one, 1,000 times a million.
10,000.
So that's 1,000 times a million, it's a billion, okay? So you have, no, but all these numbers are, but the thing is that you have, you know, the human race is just not moving faster, but technology is just exploding on the upside, right? With implications which we just cannot understand. So for you guys to be in the middle of this, I mean, wow, I'm just so envious because I'm soon finished here, you know?
You can always come back, you know. You got a spare year.
Finished, in the world, I mean.
Okay. Nicolai, a lot of someone outside stopped Nicolai to say they'd listened to your podcast, watched your podcast in great company, and a lot of people.
How many people here listen to the podcast?
Yeah.
Okay, and what's wrong with the rest of you?
Yeah. I mean, it is the sort of A to Z of leaders in the world. So just some names of you: Bob Iger and Disney. You've had Mark Rowan of Apollo. You've had Bill Gates. You've had lots of people, and I guess. And lots of them, it's an interesting, it's Reithian. So if you're familiar with the Reithian values, it's informative, educational, and entertaining.
Can I just explain why we did it?
Yeah.
Because we talked about transparency, and it's really important. And because we have all this money in the fund, we have access to all these great CEOs because we are shareholders in the companies. And so it's probably easier for us to get to talk to them. And I thought, you know, I can talk to them and just keep it all for myself, or I can record it and share it with the world and everybody else. It's interesting for the Norwegian people. It's interesting for students at the LSE. It's kind of fun, you know, and we learn a lot about it too. So that's why we did it. And then, of course, when you start something new and you don't know whether it's going to be a success or not, what do you call it? Well, you call it a pilot because you don't know whether it's going to be successful. So it turned out that we now have like 8.2 million downloads, and it's one of the biggest business podcasts in the world.
It's kind of incredible. I was going through this morning looking at the people who it's interesting. There are people that you interviewed 2 or 3 years ago who aren't in place anymore. You know, they move on for all sorts of reasons. Without naming any names, kind of, is there a reflection that you have on that? But yeah, there are talks that are pretty inspirational at the time, and the person's moved on in a year, sometimes for not reasons of their own choosing. And as someone who sees across lots of organizations, I just want to pick your brains.
No, I think that it's a reflection of CEOs being in place a shorter period of time than what was the case in the past, you know. It's tough at the top, and many people don't last that long.
Yeah. We've for a long time, we just kind of contextualize how we met. So you took the MSc here, this is 10 years ago, and you've always been very corporate culture, organizational culture, as you describe as the secret sauce for organizations. And I guess, I'm quite interested in the sauce to avoid. I realize what's the sauce that doesn't taste so good. But I wondered if you could talk.
You're more of a negative person.
I'm a positive person in my demeanor, but I'm from Scotland. It's gloomy.
So corporate culture is just one of the most amazing things. Okay, it's so interesting. When I started investing, it was more about looking at the numbers and the next quarter and the next year and so on. But then you see companies which are basically the same. Like on the outside, they have kind of the same products. You got 2 mobile phone companies being kind of the same, 2 mobile operators being kind of the same, 2 car companies being kind of the same, elevator companies kind of the same, sneaker companies kind of the same, Adidas, Nike, all these kind of things. And then it turned out that one company is hugely successful and the other one is just like a total failure. What explains this? It's the small things inside the company. And corporate culture, the definition is, of course, how do we do things around here? And just these small things, the kind of the speed you have in the organization, the responsibility you give people, the trust you give people, the way you motivate them, to promote them, it's just unbelievably powerful. I just think it's one of the most fascinating things you can study.
On that though, could you, and bearing in mind there are some students from my organizational culture class in the room, could you describe what the kind of single, is there a single particular cultural trait that trumps everything else?
So that's the thing. When you raise kids, you have these books called, Where Did It All Go Wrong? Okay? Typically like one or two things which completely fuck up your upbringing, your life, some really terrible experiences. But then there is also a book called Where Did It All Go Right? And where is that? That's like the 1,000 times that parents are doing the right things with the kids. And I feel it's the same with leadership. It's not like one or two things. It's just like, it's a whole range of things you need to get right. It's really fascinating. But if you were to kind of mention some of them, I think speed is very interesting to research speed. And it's kind of interesting because, so if you, for instance, look into anthills, okay? Let's say an ant lives for 1 year. During the lifetime of an anthill, let's say that's 15 years, the speed in the anthill, so the movement in the anthill halves, okay? Now, when the speed halves, the neighbor anthill comes and attack your anthill and just eat all of them, and you're gone, okay? That's the end of that anthill. And that's how companies work. Companies slow down. They don't last, they don't have the innovative force. They are stuck to old ways of doing things. And so companies are, like living organisms. And it's just amazing, right? So speed, one thing. Micromanagement, too much control systems, red tape, slows down the whole thing. Not very good. It's not much fun to work there. I mean, you got just lots of things. I think fun is totally underrated. Fun. I mean, that's the whole point, no? There are two professors at Stanford wrote a book called Humor Seriously, and they basically prove that people who have fun, they are more creative and just do things better.
Yeah, I guess it makes things enjoyable. I guess I'm interested as well.
You're having fun, Tom.
I'm loving it. Yes, it's brilliant. It's always enjoyable to speak to you. What about government though? And because you're now actually, I mean, I know it's the bank, but you are very close to politics. How do some of the insights that you have about corporate culture in the commercial setting go over to the non-commercial setting? So whether that's the civil service or the likes, and what could they learn? Because I mean, certainly in Britain, the state of the public sector is in a bit of a mess, I think, and I wonder what we can learn from kind of your insights across all these companies.
Well, I think the interesting thing is that we can learn a lot from each other. Public sector can learn from the private sector and vice versa. But there are very few people who move across. Either you are stuck in the private sector or in the public service. So there is very little kind of learning from the other side. I would say, what can we in the private sector learn from the public sector? Well, decision making takes more time, but when it's done, it's rock solid. It's anchored, properly anchored, and people know where you're going, and so you are, your kind of direction is set in a more solid way. What can the public sector learn from the private sector? Well, speed is one, but I think perhaps the most important one is risk, because in the public sector, you are not judged on what you do, but you are judged on not making mistakes. Yeah. And so you have a whole part of society which is extremely risk averse. Yeah. And I think perhaps that's the most important difference.
Yeah, and I think you're right there that things go wrong often because there's a satisfaction. There's not satisfaction with the status quo, but there's this fear of upsetting the status quo. And I guess the incentives that people work on are different.
Negative, Scott. You are more concerned about organizations which make mistakes. So what is the common denominator?
Yeah, I mean, it is the inverse of the common denominator is not dealing with problems, a culture of turning away from problems. And sometimes that will be deliberate. So an organization will not want to face up to what's going on. But having looked at lots of organizations that fail, it's that an organization just can't see what's going on. It's become enculturated, it's become normalized to whatever is happening. You see this in healthcare organizations all the time, where they sort of, it just slowly happens. The speed becomes slow, but no one really sees it, or the product. And I think this is true of corporations as well, though, where the organization doesn't recognize that the product no longer lands. They're kind of convinced, and they find it hard to hold the mirror up to themselves.
And then you can see these telltales. There is this book called Broken Windows, Broken Business. If something, and I've seen it several times, you commit to a company and there is just something not right. There could be like a broken window or something which has gone wrong and they haven't fixed it. Yeah. And it's often a symptom of them not dealing with things and being kind of perfectionist enough about the kind of things they have to deal with.
I think the reception of an organization tells you a lot about it, actually. What it's like in the reception. Is it clean? Is it tidy? All of those things. One of I really enjoyed out of all the episodes that you did, the ones I've listened to, I love the one with Tufan Ergenbillig at Rolls-Royce, because that kind of had a mixture of the negative and then the positive, because it was about the Rolls-Royce declined, but he described it as a burning platform, when he joined. And kind of a couple of years later, it's gone from a downward slide to a really upward one. And I just wanted you to comment maybe on do you have a sense of when an organization, because I guess this is where the real gains for the fund are, is when you can see an organization that might turn things around and will become, turn a problem around and become very successful. And are there indicators to you that tell you that that's going to happen, or social ones, environmental ones?
So the CEO of Rolls-Royce, he called it a burning platform when he joined it. I was very surprised that he did that. Because to call something a burning platform is pretty dramatic. And if you work a place where you are being described as that, I just couldn't see how that could be very motivating. Because in my mind, the previous guy who did that was the CEO of Nokia, and that subsequently went pretty much bankrupt, right? But then it's worked. He managed to create this sense of urgency and need for change, and so it's been very successful. Can you say in advance whether they can turn things around? No, I think it's tough to say. Often to turn things around, you need a new CEO from the outside. So often when you have the third profit warning, you get somebody from the outside coming in because you really need to fix it. You really need to do things in a different way. So I think the best predicator to see whether it's going to be successful is to see what he or she has done before. Because some people have execution power. And they get stuff done. And then you have other people who don't get a thing done. And I see it actually in particular in the public, in the cultural sector. You've got some people, you can give them $1 billion, they get nothing done. You can have other people, you give them like 100 and they just change the world. And it has to do with execution power. And what is that? Well, that's just like whether you are a talent magnet, whether people actually want to work with you, whether you have credibility, whether you've done things in the past. It's just like the ability to get stuff done. It's incredible. It's kind of tied in with energy. It's tied in with credibility, all these things.
On the course I teach, I talk a lot about human. You remember, I'm very interested in human factors and the kind of design of institutions. And I guess quite like the discussion you had with Tufan, because he talked a lot about aligning like the material of the organization with the vision. But it isn't just about coming in and saying, "Hey, we're going to do something." It's building it into the organization. I thought that was very interesting. I think one thing just leading off of that is that when things go wrong, it's often because those at the top have lost sight of what's going on in an organization. Either no one will tell them what's happening, or they don't get out of their offices enough. Is that something you because you obviously engage in behind closed doors with lots of the fund, with lots of CEOs and the like in an organization. How much do you value and how do you assess whether they really know their organization and what's going on in it?
Well, I think most CEOs know pretty well what's going on. The question is whether they make the really difficult decisions. Now, what are the really difficult decisions? Well, that's to shoot to pieces what you already have. And all the kind of creative destruction, the what what's called the guy Clayton, the guy who was at Harvard, who wrote about the innovator's dilemma, the fact that you need to come up with a new business model, which in the short term is really detrimental for your existing business, but which kind of creates the new runway. So some companies are able to do that, but some other people are not. I mean, the famous examples of people who haven't succeeded is things like Kodak, which didn't manage to reinvent themselves.
I mean, one thing we find sometimes, I guess we engage with a lot of organizations at the middle of them, and they often worry about how to tell those at the top about what's really going on. So an example, but we colleague Alex Gillespie, who you know very well, this company's doing its big staff survey, and they just feel the need. The results aren't great, but the people who are doing it feel the need to put a positive shine on it when they're communicating it upwards. And it's the same for customer feedback and all sorts of things. I guess that's the level I'm getting at, which is where it's not about CEOs knowing what's going on. It's recognizing that people are telling them positive things. That,
there's a lot of glossing going on, right? So how do we try to ungloss things? Yeah. We also gloss, kind of externally. I'm glossing a bit today, but internally, ideally, you don't want to gloss too much. So we introduce now what is called a straight puck award, like an ice hockey puck. So we printed them. It's like MBIM straight puck. So we have them around the table, and it's just like, I take a puck, and he's just like, Tom, can I just give you a straight puck?
Thank you.
I really think you posed a stupid question there.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. But the thing is that if you can take some negative criticism and put it into kind of into a thing, then you can do it much better. We also had a big had an anthropologist working through the whole organization, making a big report. She interviewed probably half of the number of the people in the firm and asked them about all kinds of things. She put it into a big report, and we published it on the internet. Why did we do that? I thought, you know what? If what she finds is good, great. If what she finds is bad, great. Because then we can fix it,
I want to ask.
I don't see any downside.
I want to ask about that though, because the Financial Times had the report about you probably know what I'm going to ask about. It's about the $92 million spreadsheet error that they report on. Could you? Perhaps you could tell the story of that. But to me, that just I assume that you just learned that sort of how to handle that situation for us in the Department of Psychological and Behavioral Science. But could you tell us a bit about this?
The thing is that when you have a big firm like we have, when you make a mistake, they tend to be very big. The thing you do on your spreadsheet may not be very big, but the consequences are very big. So we did one of my colleagues made a mistake, which was extremely expensive. What was it, like
It was $92 million.
Yeah.
The cost.
So it's a pretty big mistake, right?
But it was a wrong zero, according to it was just.
Well, it was just wrong. It was wrong. It was just kind of a spreadsheet mistake. Well, so what do you do then? I rang him up and said, fully understand you made a mistake. And I sent him a message saying, we do this kind of, these things happen and don't let it impact you. He is now one of the most popular leaders in the firm. We actually had an award 2 weeks ago and he won it. Best leader in the firm.
No.
That's pretty good, huh? But it's tough to get through these kind of things. So you need to show empathy and accept that we make mistakes. Now, who are the people who never make mistakes? Who are they? The people who don't do a thing, right? They don't do a thing. Never make mistakes. Oh, very good. If you listen to the podcast episodes we did with like James Gorman, who was at Morgan Stanley, Bruce Flatt, who is at Brookfield, they talk about the importance of making mistakes.
Could you talk a bit about a mistake you've made, Nicolai? What's the kind of worst mistake you've made in your, at the time at Norge or professionally, do you think?
So the thing is that if you invest, you make mistakes. If you are like really clever, you only make 48% mistakes. If you are right 52% of the time, you're like 2 standard deviations better than the market. You're a genius. And if you are right like 53% of the time, wow, you're a genius. You're like a total genius. Okay, so you just need to process your mistakes in order to improve. So the thing is, we just make mistakes all the time. I would say the big one, when in my previous company, during the financial crisis, had a big investment in a company which lent money to less fortunate people. at high interest rates, and it turned out to be accounting fraud and so on. And for me, the learning was and I would never invest in that kind of business now because I don't think it's ethical. But shady businesses attract shady characters. Stay clear.
I think that what you're talking about is very interesting, though, because when you get good at learning and picking up on mistakes, you can actually take a lot of risk, can't you, as well? Just putting it the other way around, as if you know that you're picking up on these things, it gives you license a bit more to take risks, because because you'll know if it starts to go wrong early. It enables you in some ways.
But it also has to do with how you frame it, right? You've had some rocket launches lately, right? Rocket launches, and they came back down again because they weren't unsuccessful. And it's just like, yes, okay, we crashed, but we learned so much from it. I mean, that's a pretty positive spin.
That is. Well, and maybe they won't crash. Yeah, I mean, that's how. But it's also a high risk thing, I suppose. One thing I wanted to ask about is do you recognize and I don't, this is ignorance on my part, but to what extent do you recognize people who have avoided bad investments, I guess? Do you track that? You reward people if they've made good investments, but it's like the ones that you didn't make, but if you had made, it would have been a disaster. Do you track and learn from those?
Well, we don't do that enough, but we should do.
Yeah, okay. So I think that's something that, in terms of learning, that sometimes we can also over focus on the successes and the near misses. That would be an equivalent of a near miss. We're going to start wrapping up in a couple of seconds, or in a little bit. I just wanted to pick your brain on your advice for our students. They're going to be asking some questions in a few minutes. In terms of their careers, how they're going to adapt to all of the things that are going on in the world. Perhaps they're interested in the kind of work that the bank does, or just organizations more generally. What is your advice to them?
Well, the first thing is that you need to do what you love, right? So it's about your passions. And so the first thing is just never listen to your parents, when it comes to career choice, because you will have so many setbacks in your life that if you don't love what you do, it's just not worth doing. But if you love what you do, it's just incredible. So I asked this guy called Jensen Huang, who is the CEO of NVIDIA. So I said, so Jensen, how much do you work? Well, I wake up 5 in the morning. I work until 11 every day of the week, and every Saturday and every Sunday and every holiday. Oh, wow. But when do you relax? Oh, Nicolai, I relax all the time because I love what I do, And I just think that's where you want to get to. So you just need to do what you love, okay? And the second thing is to just only focus in on learning. That's what it's all about. Learning. First job, doesn't matter whether you make any money or how much you make, as long as you learn. When you find somebody on the other side of the table who you think will teach you things, that's where you start to work. And then the other thing is just to really broaden out, read as much different type of things as you can, meet as many different types of people you can, to get, insight. So before all of you leave today, you need to shake hands with 2 people you didn't know when you came into the room, so that you have 2 more people you can say hi to on campus. And then I would say the last thing is to talk to people, okay? Talk to people. And then you say, now, Tangen totally lost the plot. Of course we talk to people. The thing is that you don't talk enough to people. Compared to 30 years ago, we talk 10% faster than we did. We actually walk and talk 10% faster, and this you can measure. They measure speed in cities, how fast people walk. But we also talk 10% faster. And at a time where we have more machines and more AI, we just need to, we can't beat the machines at being machines, but we can beat them at being human beings. And so we need to broaden out and we need to deepen down. Because, if you look at the transforming moments in your life, it's not when you got a text message or an email. It's like a conversation you had. So it's just to go deeper and be more interested in people. And it's a bit like when I ask you, so how are you today?
I'm good.
Well, but how are you really doing today? So I don't. So the thing is that normally on the second question, people are, you know what, the first one, yeah, I'm really good. Still, actually, I'm not so good. So it's to ask your friends the second question, you know, how you're really doing, and just try to drill down a bit further and see the human being, you know.
Can I ask what you're reading right now?
Oh my, I'm reading. I try to read just a lot of different books on all kinds of different topics. And so I typically read some social psychology books. I've been through, I go through most of the the things that come out there. I read some business books, some biographies.
And you find time to read?
And fiction. Yeah, I read because I try to, so I read every night. But no, I have a lot of time. Yeah. I'm not a particularly busy person because I delegate a lot. And I don't do micromanagement. And the thing is that if you do micromanagement, everything ends up at your desk. So you get biased because you think you have to go through everything. And I got really clever colleagues. So if they have read something, I don't need to read it afterwards. So I have quite a bit of time.
I think that is fantastic advice though, on delegation and trust. Actually, I think it's one that's people find hard to do, but that is also a way that you realize time, isn't it? Through trusting other people. Okay, so we have about 20 minutes of question and answers, or 15 and 20 minutes. People probably have lots of questions. Just to say, so there is a roving microphone going around. Just if people could keep their questions to be fairly concise. I apologize in advance, but if you do ramble on, I might need to interrupt you. You can, Nicolai, I don't know if there's anything you don't want to be asked, but I think people are fairly free to ask whatever they want to.
Totally.
Yeah. So I don't know, people might just start to put their hand up, and then we can pick you out at random. Yes, there's a hand at the back, please.
What do you think needs to change in Europe to boost growth to be like the US?
Okay, so how can we boost growth in Europe? Well, the first thing you need to do, I think, is to read the Draghi report, which kind of goes through all the root causes for why growth is pretty slow. But there are a whole range of things that we can do. There is not much technology companies in Europe, and so one can try to establish a better backdrop for tech companies to succeed. That has to do with education, tax systems, a unified capital market. Try to reduce bureaucracy, red tape. Has to do with energy prices, a whole range of things, right? Which is holding back Europe a bit now.
I just feel Europe's in danger of becoming a bit of a museum. I think.
Yeah, it's a good place to live, right? But it's not always easy to establish successful companies here.
On the other hand, yes, there's a jet here. Yeah.
Just touching up on the previous question, I know Norges Bank has been pretty passively with injecting capital into the economy. Is there a change of narrative now where Europe is in crisis and there's a real need for funds in the kind of transformation coming from AI in Europe?
So I'm just wondering whether Europe is in crisis. I don't think it's in crisis. I think it's slow, and there are challenges in different ways. For instance, in the defense situation, right? And we have some challenges when it comes to AI because we don't have a lot of that going on in terms of companies. And but we are not injecting money in those type of companies. We don't do venture capital, so we only do listed companies, and we don't do private equity. But we are investing in a lot of great companies. We have a lot of great companies in Europe, market leaders in many different industries.
Could you just list a couple of the companies, just to give people a little bit of context?
Yeah. So if you look at Europe, where we are strong, we have some great pharma companies. In Denmark, you have one of the insulin leaders. We have in great industrial gases companies. We have Swedish engineering companies. We have luxury goods companies in France and Italy. We got some really good companies.
Let me
I did a podcast yesterday with SAP, the software company. Very good.
Could you break down for me exactly how you make the trade-off between impact and stable returns? I mean, maybe it's a basic question, but what exactly is the strategy that you're putting out?
So impact and
between impact indicators and stable returns.
And returns. Yeah. So in a way, the trade-off between responsibility and returns. We don't think there is a trade-off. We think when we look at climate, for instance, we look at climate as a financial risk, because if you have a deterioration in the climate, it impacts harvests, productivity, insurance premiums through forest fires and so on. So we think they are closely linked. And we think in order to have people working for you, you need to be responsible. Otherwise, people don't want to work for you. Banks don't want to lend to you. So we kind of think it's the same thing, right? To have a long-term business. The other thing is that, we are invested in all the companies in the world. So if you have a company polluting somewhere, it's being picked up by all the other companies we own. So we really need to think like that.
I'm going to take another couple of questions, but Nicolai, I'm just going to ask you if there's some things that you would like to ask the students in with the spirit of in conversation. So maybe I'll just ask another question, but I don't know if there's some things you would like to ask the students about, because this is the sort of next generation workforce, and maybe there's things you'd like to know about what they kind of think about the future and the challenges and the opportunities. So maybe I'll take one question and then we'll turn it around. Yes, please.
First of all, thanks very much for taking the time to speak with us today. My name is Hadrian. I study financial history at LSE. So my question is, so in your conversation with David Solomon last December, you emphasized on commitment to sustainability, which you also emphasized today as well. And given the evolving geopolitical landscape, would the fund reconsider investing in the arms sector if the bill to lift the ban in Norway to invest in these sectors go through? Are you going to change the investment direction?
It's a good question. So we have a separate vehicle outside the fund, which is called the Council of Ethics, and they decide what we can invest in. So we are excluded from things like tobacco. We are excluded from coal. We have been excluded from weapons too. But now that's back on the agenda. So there is a potential political debate in Norway whether we should also be allowed to invest in defense companies. For the moment, we are excluded from roughly half the defense universe. So what I love to hear is just what's on your mind. What are you thinking about these days? Now, it's a very open question, but I just think it's always interesting to hear what people are concerned about. You with a tie. What are you concerned about?
Well, one thing I'm concerned about, I have personal experience with this. I think social media is a pretty big negative. Certain social medias like Instagram and kind of short form content has a pretty negative impact on most people in my generation. I feel like a lot of parents actually don't kind of underestimate the issue, and they're like, oh, the kid's just like entertaining themselves. But I do think there's certain adverse mental effects and mental health effects from that. But I also second thing, I kind of wanted to ask, what industry do you think is the best to start in finance to maximize learning for a long career?
Maybe we'll go to social media. What's your...
Yeah, social media. I just think it's really interesting. There is... you have people in this school which have zoomed in on the effect of, social media on people's mental health. There was a wave starting basically in 2008 when you had the first social media apps coming out, where there is more kind of FOMO, more, just more unhappiness, more loneliness, and so on. So it's clearly an issue, and I think it really explains a lot of the mental problems that the younger generations are going through, right?
I mean, do you see that in the fund, the kind of changing nature of the workforce, and maybe it's a sort of slightly different different process of managing and encouraging and motivating and all those things?
Well, we have, so I think younger people need more feedback. It's not enough to tell them once a year that they're okay or not okay. It's just like a daily basis. I mean, I got kids. If you don't answer their SMS within 25 seconds, it's just like, hello, are you awake? Hello. So you just need to be more on.
Yeah. Maybe there's somebody over on this side of the. I'm just. Yeah, please, the blue shirt. Yeah.
This is kind of a question and something that's been, kind of recently on my mind at least, is government debt. If you're the leader of a country with a debt to GDP ratio of above 100%, an aging population, and you've got a deadline of about 4 years until the next elections, how do you go about that problem?
Well, it's an extremely good question, right? It's a very, very good question. I think we shall see. I think we'll see. I probably think I should be a bit careful, but clearly government debt is a big issue. Budget deficits are, an important issue. I did a podcast with Ken Rogoff, which is a leading specialist on these things in the world, the Harvard professor, and he's coming out with a book on the 23rd of April, and we have a podcast coming out on the same day with him. Stay tuned.
Good. So how many people again listen to the podcast, Nicolai? It's huge, isn't it?
It's quite big.
Yeah, it's real. Yeah.
Who do you think we should have on the podcast?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Go on. Ray Dalio.
Perhaps just shout out people. Just shout.
He's the Bridgewater guy. Just shout out.
No.
Any other suggestions? Come on, you're like cool people in the world. What do you think? Sorry? You could be a guest. That's good. Yeah. But
someone said Donald Trump. What do you think, Nicolai?
We don't do politicians.
No, quite right too.
Oh. Any other suggestions? Elon Musk. We had him already.
Exactly.
Sorry?
Exactly.
Okay. Bill
Ackman.
We haven't had him. We've had Ken Griffin and Stan Druckenmiller and Howard Marks and so on, but we haven't had Ackman yet.
Nicolai, if you could do another MSc, what would it be?
You know what? So when I got this job, I had already started to think about leaving my previous firm, and I had started to apply for university because I wanted to go back to university and learn more and do another degree. And my dream was just like go to IKEA, buy some furnitures, become a student again, go to jazz clubs every night, just kind of get my life back, And then this job came up, and I thought that was fantastic. So I have this job now, but I'm going to go back to university afterwards. I think there are so many different and interesting degrees. I mean, I think anthropology is really interesting. I would love to study music. Just so many things. So you need to have. So what's kind of some really odd or strange interests that you guys have? Some really off the chart, weird. Come on. Like what do you do for fun? So I go mushroom foraging in the forest. I think that's fantastic.
Okay, so a brave. Yep, go on.
What do you do?
Well, right now I'm doing watercolors of so some people I find around the
watercolors.
Yeah. Watercolors of friends or people I find around the uni. So I have a weird collection of watercolors.
That's great. Watercolors, I love it.
People that I've been drawing. And then apart from that, I'm trying to find the oldest textbooks and books that I can find at the uni. I try to read some old English books, old Spanish books to see how far my knowledge goes. Yeah, thanks.
Cool.
Anybody else? Anything beat mushroom picking?
So I'm looking for weird stuff when I look at CVs. Okay, you wanna find something which makes you stand out. So if you haven't found it, just figure it out, and then show that you have a sense of humor. And So one of the best CVs I ever saw was it's finished off by a pathetic golfer. And because I kind of thought that captured his sense of humor and his self, deprecation, and I loved it. I hired him.
Yep.
It's a nice question, but the different ones like this way so much.
Yep.
Really good. We go around the back.
Yeah, I don't.
Thanks.
Just about CVs. I sense there's like a lot more and more great generalists around me. So I was wondering, how does a generalist fare when you look through CVs, and do you think that there should always be a specialty added to great and exceptional generalism, really?
It's a great question. I mean, personally, I'd rather have somebody with 2 or 3 master degrees in different fields rather than just one PhD. We got some really good PhD guys in the firm, and they are very, very important and very good. But I kind of think it's more fun to do more different types of masters. It also depends on what kind of person you are. What's your attention span? How much do you love your footnotes? If you love your footnotes, you want to do a PhD. If not, you do some more masters. And I also think it has to do with, you work in a company. You have so many different types of tribes, and you have different types of jargons and languages. And the more different things you know, the more comfortable you are in speaking to different parts of the firm and get them all to work together. Mm. I've had so much pleasure from my social psychology degree. I mean, it's just unbelievable. I use it all the time. And you also learn how to ask questions, and we work very hard on what previously was called interrogation techniques. Now it's called conversation management. And what's the key? Well, first you open up with an open-ended question. Just like, what are you thinking about these days? And then you get people started and they talk about things you never thought was possible. You don't link 2 questions together. You have one at a time. And then you drill down the logical levels. I mean, it's incredible.
Can I ask about, I wondered about historians. I mean, they must have a particular, they must have a real moment right now. People who study the trends of change and the like. So I wondered to what degree something like fund, actually people who have it's not just about the economics, finances of the world, people who have a long view or longer view on change and the world and events. I wondered how that fits into the kinds of people you hire and the skills that knowledge that you value.
Well, we try to hire people with a very broad skill set, right? So in the old days, we brought economists. Now we hire all types of things. And in particular in this country, you have great tradition in hiring people into the financial sector who's got everything from theology to history, right? I think history is a great thing. Before this, I met the director at the LSE. He's got a degree in English history, and he came up with some very interesting similarities between the situation now and what we have seen in the past.
Mm. Well, maybe one last
one. We'll have a few.
Yeah, have you got a few?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, okay, great. Please.
So what advice would you give to emerging fund managers in terms of fundraising?
Fundraising. Well, fundraising is tough, right? It's very tough. I'm not sure I have any good advice. To never give up, never give up, you never give up.
We'll move on then. Is anyone over in the corner? Because I realised, there's a hand up right over in the corner. And then I'll come to this side over here afterwards.
So you talked a lot about kind of like defense and also AI. Where do you see the role of the investment sector in enabling or hindering geopolitical power of different countries or units?
I'm not sure the investment sector has any role in that. You could argue that venture capital is perhaps having a role in it, in financing new technologies. That's clear both in the US and in Europe.
Mm.
I mean, even NATO has a venture capital arm associated with it. It's probably financing, generally speaking, VCs financing a lot of the new generation weapon systems.
Mm. Okay, and then we'll go over here. with the glasses at the back, please. So yeah, you.
It's just I read a lot about like Danish pension funds changing their strategy around investments. I was thinking about if you did some of the same thing, especially with like the political instability in the US.
Yeah, we have. So first of all, we don't feel that we don't kind of think we are invested in the US as such. We are invested in American companies, and so we continue to own the very big American companies. We think they are, very good. I think it's interesting what we're seeing now. We're seeing huge concentration in the stock market. So typically now the top 10 companies would be more than 20% of the index. So that's a concentration we've never seen before. And it's partly because we live in a society where winner takes it all. And you see it in football. You guys know the Norwegian guy, Haaland, pretty good, making lots of money. We see it in pop music. There are now more people listening to Taylor Swift than everybody listening to classical music and jazz music combined. Okay? And you see it in the technology sector. You see it more than before because you have these platform companies. And so, for instance, Facebook, you are on Facebook because everybody else is on Facebook. So the fact that you get big makes you get even bigger. You take Uber because there's so many, so you get them within, minutes. And then you see it in AI more than in anything else because it's so expensive to develop the models. So this kind of winner takes it all is just being accelerated in society. Very, very interesting.
Nicolai, it's 5:30, so I think we're going to have to call things to a halt. Maybe we have one last question, and maybe just a final thought from you. A lot of hands here. At the back, please. Yes. Yeah.
I was curious, what makes you the most nervous about the world or cautious about the development?
Well, there are many reasons to be nervous about the world. Geopolitics, trade barriers, all these kind of things. But typically the world kind of gets through these things, right? It kind of muddles through and it turns out to be okay. So most likely the world will be okay. And in the meantime, we just need to be kind of fascinated by what's going on and approach it as a student, a student of society and developments. It's just an incredible time to be alive. Unbelievable.
The thing you're most optimistic about, just to end on a very optimistic note.
I'm just so optimistic when I see you guys. I mean, you're the future and all these questions and all these incredible opportunities you have. You get better opportunities to learn than we had, better opportunities to travel and to get to know each other. So that's really good. Okay, so good luck with everything. Go get them, have fun.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Nicolai. Thanks everyone for attending. A big round of applause. Thank you.